towards the European Open Standards for Construction Products. My name is Julien de Cruz from Ruud Pedersen Public Affairs, and I will be the moderator behind the scenes for this webinar. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Chris Davis, who is going to be the host and introduce you to our panelists.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to update you on the latest developments in creating a European open standard for a health product declaration in construction products. A workshop was held last April, so those of you who attended will know that the idea is to fashion a voluntary agreement covering product content, addressing possible hazards for health and the environment, and enabling construction products to play their part in building a circular economy. I'm Chris Davis. I'll be chairing today's discussion, and having been a member of the European Parliament's Environment Committee for some 15 and more years, I'll be asking a few questions of my own. But we also want you to feel free to submit questions, and at any time, indeed, from now during the course of the next 90 minutes, we'd ask you to use the chat, option on Zoom rather than Q&A. So please chat, not Q&A. With me, I have Olympia Doller, Sustainable Construction Manager with Eurima, Charlotte Pietro, Senior Manager Project Sustainability with Saint-Gobain, and Bruno Bleaky, Product Stewardship and Standardization Manager with Knauf Insulation. Now, you've already heard from Julien de Cruz, who's a Senior Consultant with Ruud Pedersen Public Affairs and was also with the European Chemicals Agency before that. So Julien is going to be our technical moderator, so I can blame him for all the technical problems that we will no doubt inevitably encounter during the next hour and a half or so. No doubt he'll have some words of his own to say in his own right, because he's been working with the product sponsors. Now,
that's right. Yes, and Chris, I will happily take the blame for any technical glitches. I just wanted to add as well that as a housekeeping remark that this webinar is being recorded. However, if you do not wish to be recorded, if we may be giving the floor to some participants at one point or another, should that happen, you can let us know afterwards. But other than that, I think we are ready to go.
Well, I'm sure Julien will also be stressing the openness and transparency of the entire process, so people would be aware of that. And I will certainly blame you for all technical problems. Now, let's start. Let me turn to you, Olympia. 3 companies, Eurima, Saint-Gobain, and Knauf Insulation. You've taken the lead in sponsoring this initiative. So why do you think it's important for the construction industry as a whole that it proceeds?
Very good question. Let me try to answer to the point. I think the biggest reason why we need such initiative is because we are facing a very ambitious European Commission. I mean, we see there is a big EU Green Deal already in place since December. We have a new Circular Economy Action Plan since March. Today, it's a special day because we have 2 communications that were published by the European Commission. We have the big renovation wave and the chemicals strategy for sustainability. I mean, each of them embrace are part of a new strategy from the Commission. The first one speaks about legislative and non-legislative measures that would enable faster, deeper renovations of the building stock. We see measures that would apply on European level. We see measures that would apply at national level. We already see, engagements from certain countries. We have the strategy for chemicals, sustainability for chemicals, which is biggest objective is to find a way and introduce, let's say, non-toxic materials from the waste back to the loop. Everything, let's say, embraces a new way, a new digital way to track down these harmful substances. And let's say, succeed in this non-toxic environment. Of course, nevertheless, we also have next year a very intense year of policies that are upcoming. The most relevant ones for our sector is the big strategy for a sustainable built environment. We expect many things such as digitalization, ways on how to embrace life cycle approach of the buildings, levels project. We were working on this in a pilot mode as a whole sector, but now it will be part of an official legislation. Sustainable products policy. So we have at the building level, we will also have things that are coming at the product level that introduce this circular by design principle, things like durability, recycled content, recyclability, all these elements in a digitalized format. These are keywords that we see that will also be part of these legislative proposals. And of course, we cannot forget the big construction products regulation, which will be introduced after these policies. And we see that there is a tension in general for stricter regulatory frameworks. And I mean, we are still scoping the revision process of these regulations. Of course, we expect many elements from the previous ones already mentioned to be translated into this regulation. Circularity, digitalization, and sustainability of construction products will be key in what we will see in the coming years.
Okay, thanks very much, Olympia. And as the slide reminds us, I mean, there's simply an enormous amount on the agenda that can affect the industry over the next few years. And I suppose, would I be right, Olympia? I mean, one of the things that you're doing here is, by taking this initiative, is to make sure that the construction industry has a seat at the table as the Commission starts developing things like its construction products regulation and the like. You're able to shape things better if you're sitting with the players rather than simply sitting back and protesting about how difficult it will be. Yes,
I think what I could add to your point, Chris, is that the Commission wants solutions, and this initiative will bring solutions that could well integrate the objectives of what we have seen from the Commission, that they're seeking for solutions. And this is what we will try to do with this initiative. And that's why we want to present it today.
Okay, yeah, you're looking for solutions. Julian, let's have a look at the next slide, if you will.
Of course.
Okay, so back to you, Olympia. I mean, looking for solutions. I mean, I suppose these are some of the issues that you're trying to address.
Yes, absolutely. I think Charlotte would be better to highlight this, but let's see from Charlotte's point of view what could be it.
Yeah, thank you, Olympia. Yes, I think today we are launching an initiative because this initiative is really embedded in a general trend, a general tendency that aims to provide transparent information on the substances contained in the products that people buy and use. And in the construction sector in particular, this tendency is really gaining traction, and it is supported by two main trends, which are the trend for healthy buildings and the trend for circular economy. So the objective of these trends are to phase out hazardous substances in construction products and buildings to move toward healthier buildings. And also the second objective is to enable a transition toward circular building, as the information on the composition of products is an important prerequisite for an efficient recycling. So in this context, manufacturers such as Saint-Gobain or Knauf or many other manufacturers receive increasing demand regarding product content and hazard information. And in parallel, there is also an increasing number of schemes, of labels and methods. And at the end, we can say that there is a lack of standardization between all these methods. And most of all, from a European point of view, there is also a lack of harmonization between these methods and the European framework regarding chemicals, as for example, CLP or REACH. Indeed, in fact, yes, the lists which are embedded in these methods are in general not aligned, not consistent with the European classification of hazardous substances. Yes, so at the end, it generates, I would say, a burden for manufacturers, also confusion for end users, and also we can say that from a policy point of view, it's not maybe the most efficient way to move forward.
Okay, well, I guess I'm probably the only one, not only amongst the panelists here, but amongst those viewing this webinar discussion, who is not part of the construction industry. So it comes as a surprise to me, really, that I suppose maybe I think when I think about it, maybe not such a surprise that people, it's not immediately obvious to the users of some of these products what's in them. I mean, you know, this is the day when the revised European chemical strategy is launched. So obviously people start being particularly alert about the potential for toxic products in toxic substances in some of the products they're using. Has this not been addressed in the past? I mean, this initiative is genuinely new.
It really depends on the market. I think in the US, maybe they are more in advance. Also, in some Nordic countries in Europe, they are more in advance. But also that's the reason why there are many trends and many different labels. And that's the reason why today, as the trend is gaining traction, we would like to provide a harmonized tool to be sure that this trend, which is a very good trend for healthier buildings and circular economy, is the most efficient possible for both manufacturer and user and from a policy point of view. Okay,
thank you. Julian, next slide. And staying with you, Charlotte, I mean, the vision here, I mean, the starting point is that, as I understand it, you want manufacturers to sign up to a voluntary agreement that they will document the chemical substances used in their products. Is that right, or am I missing it slightly?
No, yes, exactly. Our objective is really to deliver and to develop a voluntary framework for the declaration of product content and also hazard information. So the aim is really to provide clear rules for manufacturers for the communication of the substances inside the product as placed on the market, and also the information related to the hazard of these substances with a method that is consistent with the European framework and the European hazard classification.
And if you don't, I mean, if the industry doesn't take this initiative, it just seems to me that the Commission is going to insist upon something within the next few years.
Yes, I think things are moving in that direction, and we want to be part of that movement. And the idea is really to be a force of proposition, to also not to reinvent the wheel, because as you will see, there are many things that are already existing, and we would like to be part of this transition and provide also the solutions that we think is the best for us and also for the end users.
Okay, I was asked originally to come and take part as a former parliamentarian to ask for my opinion about voluntary agreements. And really, I've only got one. There's one element to them, you know, having watched various over the decades, and it all comes down to trust. Can you actually trust those who signed up to the voluntary agreement to deliver on their promise? Now, that's what that's the key to it all, and what you are promising here is openness and transparency in terms of the declaration of the substances within the products. That's correct?
Yes, exactly. And regarding this vision, this objective, we have two important values, two important aspects we would like to insist on. It's the collaborative and open aspects. And since the beginning, our objective has been to develop a framework in collaboration with many stakeholders, manufacturers for sure, but also builders and users, and also green building councils. And also, since the beginning, we have been looking for the support of public authorities to challenge our goal and to be sure that this initiative makes sense from an industry point of view, but also from a policy point of view. And on the other aspect, yes, we want this framework to be open, and we want to develop guidelines which are publicly available, and also to propose some tools that could be really easy to access. And we hope that these values will generate the trust and the recognitions.
But the argument against this from some manufacturers may be, you know, the issues of commercial confidentiality. There was a reason why people don't publish all the substances in their products. It's that they want to have a unique selling point, you know, a secret ingredient, which gives them the market opportunity.
Yes, it's really a challenge for the manufacturers, and we will have to manage this challenge, and it's very difficult for some. It's most difficult for some categories of product, but yes, we have to deal with this challenge. We know that at what point all these policies are also moving in that direction with the SKIP database, or more and more transparency that we need to deliver. And I think we need to go in that direction step by step. So far it's a voluntary framework. There is no obligation to provide the information, and also we will propose some options to keep some substances proprietary. It's not a full and mandatory declaration. There are options to deliver transparency, but moving step by step to be sure that it's also acceptable for all the parties.
Okay, I'm sure we'll explore that. I'm sure there'll be some questions about that during the course of the webinar. But just tell me, this is about the construction products industry, and there must be an enormous number of construction products of many different varieties. I mean, how many do you think you can actually, you know, you're stretching out your arms here and trying to include as many manufacturers as you can. But there must be some products, for example, which very clearly fall within the REACH legislation, and no voluntary agreement is going to substitute for the legislative requirements.
Yes, in fact, it's an additional voluntary framework, because we think that we really go beyond the regulation. We provide more transparency, because we will try to move toward a full content declaration, and also we will address not only substances and mixture, but also articles. So we really think that with this initiative, we go beyond the regulation, but as I said, from a voluntary point of view. So no, just to be sure that we are able to move step by step in the good direction. Okay,
stay ahead of the game, and therefore stay in the game, I think would be one way of looking at it. Now, let me let you off the hook for the moment, Charlotte, and turn to Bruno. Bruno, we're talking here, I sometimes get a bit confused with the terminology here, because on the one hand, we're talking about you know, a declaration, and some people would call it standard or certification or framework. What is an open standard? Just explain to me, what is an open standard?
Well, in the context of the EU standardization area, we often use the word standard in the context of standard developed by the European standardization bodies. But here the open standard, and it's also the philosophy that we have, is like, it's a standard that will, it's rather a declaration method, or a voluntary declaration method of content declaration and hazard identification, rather than a standard as we used to know it, or we used to understand it at European level in the context of the standardization activities. And the philosophy of the open standard is like, this is also a vision that we are sharing with Euhpd Collaborative in the US, is like, the members of this voluntary declaration method scheme will be the actor of the development and the evolution of the standard. So the standard is completely open, and it's not completely frozen, neither pushed straight forward into the camp of the manufacturers. It's, I would say, a win-win situation for both the manufacturer, but also the end user, because the open standard has the vocation to involve the manufacturer into the development of the content declaration, the reporting method, and also the hazard identification that are clearly tied together with the stringent regulatory framework we know when it comes to dealing with chemicals. And you know, like me, that chemicals in Europe are strangely regulated. We talk about REACH, we talk about CLP, there are so many others, chemical regulation in Europe. But the willingness and the wish is to have this standard as open as possible. It's a voluntary program. Everybody is welcome for joining, but it's an open standard that will be evolving together with the manufacturers and all the stakeholders involved into the program as really the actor of the evolution of the standard.
Well, it's voluntary, but just I'm just reflecting on the fact that, you know, if this progresses as you wish it to, then you wouldn't, if you were a manufacturer of one particular product with a couple of competitors, you wouldn't wish not to be involved, would you? I mean, otherwise your competitors potentially are going to be designing the framework. And, you know, they may not be designing the framework as you would wish. Is that a fair question? I mean,
as I say,
I know we're just sort of we're exploring how to move forward here, but I'm conscious that if this does move forward as you wish, and you are a manufacturer yourself of construction products, you wouldn't wish the standards to be drawn up by one of your competitors. You want to be involved yourself.
I think here we are not talking about having a competitive edge. We are talking about developing a method of content declaration and reporting of the content and the hazard identification. The content declaration and the reporting tool will be standardized. So everybody will have to use the same way of declaring them, the same way of reporting the content declaration. And anyway, the hazard identification, and this is the main difference with the US-based system, will be tied with the EU regulatory framework, REACH and CLP I mentioned. But these ones are evolutive, and everybody evolves into the same direction at the same speed. So we are not trying here to, from a hazard identification point of view, to diverge too much from, or not at all, from the regulatory framework. And within the EU regulatory framework, talking about the chemical.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, well, let's. I mean, you're not starting from scratch here. You've already done a fair bit of work, and this slide before us now helps explain some of that. So, talk us through what's been done already in terms of developing the Euhpd.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the initiative, we looked at all other existing voluntary content declaration schemes and method worldwide. And as Charlotte rightly mentioned, we identified the lack of homogeneity or / standardization, but I'm using this word with some care, in terms of product content declaration, reporting method, but also in terms of hazard identification of substance contained in construction product. So when it comes to the hazard identification, we had a variety of, I would say, lists that were supporting this hazard identification that we called a little bit, or that we split in two categories. The authoritative list, so the list of hazard identification based on a robust scientific and regulatory review process, and not so, or not at all, authoritative list, which were not based on this thorough regulatory and scientific review. However, you know that the chemicals are quite strictly regulated in Europe, and that each manufacturer placing chemicals onto the EU market has to be compliant with this regulation. So this assessment, this first benchmark, clearly showed us that there was a need for both, for the harmonization of a content declaration method and reporting, but also coupled with the hazard identification, really tight with the EU chemical policy framework we operate each day, and we will continue to operate tomorrow in the context of a circular economy. So that was the initial step. The second step was when the benchmark was completed, we identified Euhpd voluntary framework as a starting point to develop a European standard, while it would help us to minimize the effort and the investments, notably on the content declaration method and the reporting also IT tool, because when you look at the Euhpd collaborative system that is in place in the US, they do have already this system, this content declaration system and tools and guidelines that are in place and benefiting from the infrastructure they had, and they have already well established in the US in terms of content declaration and reporting, would help us to save a tremendous amount of time and to quickly move the initiative forward. What was really a little bit not missing but different, or has to be tweaked to the EU reality, and we already discussed about this, was the EU hazard identification based on the stringent regulatory framework. However, the identification of HPDC Collaborative as a potential partner made us believe that we could solve quite quickly. One of the first challenges was to have a content declaration, harmonized content declaration method, and an IT tool supporting it in the EU side of the business. As a third step, of course, once having identified EU HPDC in the US, we discussed with them to set the scene for a future agreement based on our respective requirements. Very quickly, we realized that we shared common objectives together of promoting a reliable, trustable, consistent and transparent product content declaration and hazard identification for a better built environment. And as Charlotte has rightly explained at the beginning, to try to start phasing out chemicals of concern, but also to promote the circular economy rise in the European Union, as Olympia has described as well. Furthermore, and to try to solve the second, I would say, challenge we had around the hazard identification, HPDC was and is still very receptive and aware about the stringent regulatory framework that we have to live with in Europe and in which we operate. And they are absolutely willing and they are ready to adapt their open standard and to translate it into a European hazard identification context, which was quite compelling and quite appealing and seducing for us. Obviously, the step 4 was to start drafting a working version of the EU specification. And as we say, we benefited from the existing method on a content declaration and reporting from HPDC, and we had to develop the hazard identification method for the EU regulatory environment. But I guess this one will be slightly developed further on into the next slides. But the last but not least step was to set up the EU HPD Association to lay down the conditions and the governance model behind the initiative and how the EU entity will operate and collaborate with its US-based partner. But I guess this is also is going to be discussed in the next couple of slides. So that's by big and large what we have done so far to come to the presentation we have today. Right. Thank you, Bruno. We will come on to that. Perhaps the absolute core of our discussion with the next slide. Can I just remind you that you're listening to Olympia Dollar from Eurima, Charlotte Petiot from Saint-Gobain, and Bruno Bleeky from Knauf Insulation. And please feel free to use the chat box at any time to submit any questions you might have to our participants here. Now, move to the next slide, please, Julian. Right, so back to you, Bruno. I think the headline of this slide is very clear. What's the process? What are you asking of the construction product manufacturers who are listening to this webinar?
Yeah, so I think and I hope that it's clear that we want to provide an EU-wide framework to communicate, to declare and communicate product content of construction product and the hazard identification associated with the chemicals that are contained into the construction product. So I would say the EU HPD, it's a kind of a 3-step process. The first one is the information supplied by the manufacturer. And we would ask the manufacturer to consider all the substances that are contained into its finished product and to its construction product as placed on the market. It takes into account intentionally added substance that are constituting the product alongside with residues and impurities, if they are, let's say, above 2 thresholds that we are proposing for content declaration. And the first, I would say, threshold is 0.1%, which is quite famous in the world of REACH and CLP, which is the minimum sometimes threshold that is applied for hazardous classification. But we also propose, and it's going to be up to the manufacturer to decide, if he wants to, I would say, use the 0.1 classical one, or if he wants to go one step further and declare the chemical content of its construction product down to 0.1%, which is 10 times lower than the 0.1. Together with this, there will be, for each chemical substance, they will be identified with identification number, CAS number, name, but they will also be evaluated against a hazard identification grid based on REACH and CLP. And the idea, the final results will be that the end user or the person that will receive or that will convey this Euhpd will have a clear understanding on this product is composed by these chemicals, and the hazard associated with each chemicals is clearly spelled out, identified based on a robust regulatory framework that is currently in place in Europe. The Euhpd does not have vocation to say this product is healthier than the other one. It doesn't have the vocation neither to say it is safe to use into this application or not. It's just a result of a content declaration and a hazard identification associated with chemical substance. But the beauty we hope with this system is like the end results of the Euhpd could be conveyed to other, I would say, platform, as it is currently done in the US for LEED or WELL, but the end user could use the results of this Euhpd and plug it into different programs for healthy buildings, for example. So it would be a kind of a fit-for-purpose declaration for several programs that could be promoted, used, or fostered by manufacturer or someone else down to the supply chain of the construction product. So this is by big and large what the Euhpd is all about. And maybe if you move to the next slide, unless Chris, you do have a question.
Well, no, I do. Please, let's move to the next slide. But I'm conscious that Charlotte made the point earlier on that we're not inventing the wheel here, because the Americans have taken the lead, and many of the procedures that Bruno, you've just been outlining, there's already examples of them working in practice. So let's have a look at the next slide. And Bruno, do you want? I mean, is this based on European standards or American standards here?
No, this is based on the European standard. So when it comes to hazard identification proposal, we propose that this identification is carried out based on three main, what we call authoritative list, and I explain what we consider as authoritative list. And for those who are playing with REACH and CLP in their daily operations, they are familiar with the REACH, with the CLP Annex 6, with the EU harmonized classification, the REACH candidates list of substance of very high concern, and the Annex 14, which is the substance subject to authorization, and the SIN list. The SIN list is outside of the regulatory framework, but it's a kind of a updated or upgraded or a more complete list of substance of very high concern than the one described into the REACH candidate list. So this is the one step further we are going from the regulatory framework, but we believe that the SIN list is quite an authoritative list and is robust enough from a scientific point of view, because it captures really REACH and CLP hazardous classification when it comes to substance of very high concern criteria. So the declaration would look like, as a little bit explained already. You would have a substance, a concentration, a hazard identification based on the EU regulatory framework and the three lists I gave. If these three lists are not applicable, we are also obviously open to REACH dossier classification or CNL inventory. And each substance, depending on their hazard identification, would get a ranking. And the higher the ranking, the worse we could consider the hazard associated with these chemicals. And if you move to the next slide, maybe.
Just yes, please do. Please.
Yeah. And so we give the ranking based on a scientific proposal. So from 1 to 4, 1 being the most severe or the worst score, 4 being the non-classified, non-hazardous substance, And for instance, the level 1 would be the substances that are on the REACH candidate list or the SIN list, or that would be classified as a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic type of substance. And you see on the right side the different touch points and hazardous classification from the CLP. That would be considered as 1. At the other side of the spectrum, as I said, we do have non-classified substance. So that would be a score 4. And in between category 2 and 3 would be what we call medium level, from high level to medium level of concern in the EU regulatory framework. And you still have on the right side the hazardous classification, but I propose not to go through too much into details of this, but it gives you a spirit of the ranking from the worst to the best, the worst being number 1, each candidate list, CMR SIN list, 4 being non-classified, and you do have 2 different intermediate classification in between for high and medium level of concern.
Okay. Right. Now
we have a few questions from the floor. I think now would be a good time to take them.
Julian. Yes, indeed. So I think all the panelists, and indeed I think all our participants can see these the questions. So let's start with the question from Nicholas Ward. What would be the difference between this EU Health Product Declaration and EU applicable safety data sheets for articles rather than chemicals? Are you I throw that over to you, Bruno, perhaps, unless Charlotte or Olympia feels better qualified to answer it.
Could you please, Chris, repeat? The line was a little bit cut, please.
Go on, Julian, just technically, just tell us who can actually see the chat.
Nicholas is asking what in practice would be the difference between an EU HPD declaration and a safety data sheet for articles.
My question to you, Julian, though, just if I can interrupt, is just who can actually see the chat questions that have come in? Because I can see them, and I'm very happy to read them out to our panelists. But
I think all the panelists can see them, so
right. Okay.
Should be able. But
fine.
I'm happy to read that out. Yes,
that's fine. Over to you, Bruno, for the first question.
Well, first of all, safety data sheets are not required for articles. They are required for substances and mixtures if they are classified and if they are meeting a certain criteria laid down into the regulation. For the moment, the only requirement that the chemical regulation are imposing to articles is the declaration of substance of very high concern at more than 0.1%. However, the regulation does not say which media you do have to use to convey down to the supply chain this information. Some manufacturers are using safety data sheet, even though not required from a regulatory standpoint. Some others are using technical data sheet or safe use instruction sheet. So for the moment, I would say that for articles, well, the disclosure, the regulatory disclosure requirement is quite light. It's going to be SVHC at more than 0.1%, which is not giving you the full or a very complete disclosure of what your product content is all about. So if you look at, and I will potentially put aside a little bit the safety data sheet because it's not applicable for article, but to do an article, you just have to say, this is my article, this is the technical data sheet, and by the way, maybe not, I do have substance of very high concern at more than 0.1%. You can also convey safe use and disposal. The EU HPD will tell you, this article is composed of this substance, including potentially and surely the substance of very high concern at more than 0.1%. So for articles, for which for the moment there are very limited disclosure requirement, this EU HPD would go way forward than it is currently today by providing a more complete disclosure in a transparent, harmonized way that this information could be used throughout the supply chain and ultimately also support the circular economy exercise.
I think that's a really very, very specific answer. Thank you. Right, let's turn to Paul Ashford's question, which is, how will the system deal with polymers, bearing in mind the insufficiency of the CAS system for hazard characterization? I'm glad these questions not being directed to me. I tell you.
Maybe it's a very specific question, so not too much time on that topic, but I can say that HPDC in the US is in advance on this topic and is currently developing some specific guidelines how to report the polymers and how to report the residual monomers and how to declare the hazard of these different substances. So the question is really a good question, and there are currently working groups at US level and in the short term also in the European level.
Fine, thank you. And finally, the three questions we've had submitted so far from Hans-Jörg Kirsten, where he's challenging and saying hazard is not related to content only. It's dependent from release and exposure, time and frequency. For example, in the heavy metals in concrete, there's a difference between dust release toward affecting workers and no, well, this is the old risk versus hazard question, isn't it? Do you mean classification rather than hazard? Yeah. You've seen that question, but am I right here? This is the old, is there a risk or is there a hazard?
Yeah, I think it's also a good question. Bruno provided a few elements of answer. So far, the goal of this initiative is really to deliver the first two bricks, which are the information on the content and the information on the hazard. But for sure, we are all aware that it's not sufficient to make a decision after. And so the third brick, which is the assessment regarding risk and regarding also safety, is really up to the end user. And so far, our goal is not to provide this third step of methodology. And we know that there are different assessment methods, different labels, different framework. And so far, it's up to each end user to be able to use the transparent information that we will deliver to make this assessment. And it's really the philosophy of the HPDC in the US, and I think it's quite good. It's not a competitive solution with all these kind of labels of methods. It's really a framework for having transparent and harmonized information at the beginning.
Thank you. I hope that the questioners are satisfied with the answers they've received. Bruno, yes, you wanted to move on to the next slide, so let's do that, if that's okay, Julian. So Bruno, okay, by international partner, I think we're principally talking about the Americans who are. This is the Health Product Declaration Collaborative, or is that what it is? Collaboration?
HPD.
Collaborative.
HPD collaborative, yeah.
Yeah, that's in the United States.
HPD.
What I mean, what's the advantage? What's the advantage? You know, given difficulties in having trade, a trade agreement between the USA and Europe, in having a close partnership with the Americans on this.
Yeah, so I already quite touched based a bit previously with you, and I hope I've been clear. Is like, for the moment, the HPD collaborative and the open standard that has been developed in the US has some features that are almost readily available in terms of content declaration, IT support tool to solve the first brick, or to build up the first brick that Charlotte mentioned, which is the content declaration method and the reporting tool. HPD Collaborative is a trustable partner, is a recognized partner in the US as well. It's a member of association of over 300 members, which represent the full spectrum of the building industry. It can be manufacturer, it can be designers, building owners, consultant, tool developers, etc., etc. But they share, all of them, the same purpose and the same common goal, which is to improve the transparency of information and the material health of the built environment. Their approach to us is seducing because they are really using a consensus-based stakeholder approach and process. And I already said the HPD members are creating and supporting and make the standard evolve and developing. So to us, that was really on top of what I already said, what was seducing us and what made HPD Collaborative a trustable partner. But at the end of the day, HPD is also developing APIs and IT tools that enable the end user to take the results of the EU HPD, of the first two bricks, and to integrate them into other program platforms such as Lead, Well, and many others that are already developed together and working in collaboration with HPDC in the US. And I think that the slides that we have in front of us is pretty self-speaking.
more than 300 member companies, 6,000 HPDs, more than 1,000 HPD downloaded every month, and these multiple APIs and online tools to create and the HPDs, but also to integrate them into other platforms. And this is based also on the fact that they were willing also to listen to us, that they were willing also to adapt their standard and collaborate with us at EU level. Taking our EU regulatory framework into account was also the reason why we trusted HPDC as a partner in this initiative.
I'm not used to the Americans having a lead in this when it comes to setting environmental standards, but that seems to be the case here.
Yeah, I think they are at the forefront of the development of a solution that will be needed, or is already needed in Europe. But they have set up the scene quite importantly and in an impressive way. And I think we have also to learn of what's good around us, and if this solution is also trustable and usable in Europe. And with some adaptation to the EU environment, why not? So yeah, they are really leading this, and they are the forefront of the transparency content declaration in the construction industry.
Certainly, there's a lot of companies listed there, a lot of companies participating. Of course, in the United States, they'll have different standards and requirements from in Europe, but I suppose that doesn't matter in this instance, because what you're looking at here is the framework, isn't it? It's how you actually put in process the relationship between companies in order to develop our own open standard. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Okay.
Maybe Charlotte, you jump on this one. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just saying, Charlotte. Obviously, the Americans will have different standards and work to different requirements from European companies. But in this instance, collaboration with the Americans, the HPDC, it's about borrowing the methods and the practices of developing the framework, is it not? The actual details of it are decided will be decided by member companies in Europe.
Yes, for sure. What we envision is really a collaborative framework, both so at European level and also in collaboration with the US. But I think Olympia will describe the governance that we envision in the next slide.
Yeah, yeah. Can I just ask, just in case we're going ahead of ourselves here, to what extent is the European Commission? I mean, have we had any discussions with the European Commission about the progress of this of this open standard? I mean, are we going with the flow? Are we going in the right direction? The direction they would like us to go, or are we going to end up in some sort of confrontation in a few years' time?
It's one for Olympia, I think.
Yes, maybe I can answer that. We slowly tested the waters, I mean, in terms of vision and what we really want to achieve from this initiative. And I would say the vision is very well embraced by at least some people that we have touched the base from the Commission. Of course, we need to make it more official as from now on, and that's why we wanted to share this vision also with our colleagues from construction products, but also the users of this new framework, so that we could be stronger in the future and to have more, let's say, up to the point discussions with the Commission, because support would be important and it would be shown in a completely different way by the Commission. So yes, that's what I could add here.
Okay, thanks, Olympia. Now, there's one more question before we move on. This is from Sabine Cressira, and I think it's quite a challenging question, really, to our sponsors and perhaps those watching. If I'm right here, the point is that that is made is the different product sustainability schemes and all the different environmental labels are based on business cases based on business cases going beyond the regulations and yet asking for disclosure at much lower levels for their assessments. Non-harmonized disclosure requirements are part of the business models. And the question is, she's wondering if they will accept, if the manufacturers will accept their business cases being destroyed by this initiative. Would it destroy their business case? Would the potential participatory companies feel challenged to request much lower levels of information than you're suggesting in this initiative? Can I, who'd like to try that one? I mean, the question really is, are the potential participants in this framework open standard, are the various manufacturers, do they set their sights as high as you do?
If I may, if I understand the question, I think it's really in line with what I said previously regarding the last brick. I think we're here to provide guidance and framework for just providing clear information on content and hazard. And as we have said, it's not enough to really go toward labeling of products or developing safe guidelines for green buildings, etc. So I think this initiative is not at all in competition with other schemes that could have an economical business case. And really, I had this surprise when I had the first conversation with HPDC in the US, just having just being aware that they are not at all in competition with a C2C or declare or labels at building level. It's really provide information that is put to everybody on a sound basis. It's really not a competitive framework.
Thank you. Okay, now if we're going to end up with a health products declaration for construction products that the industry can commit itself to take part in developing, then there's going to have to be a procedure for agreeing these details, for sitting around the table, for sorting out the requirements and how products will be assessed and the like, and then for ensuring that what is agreed is applied properly by everyone involved. So I think the proposal here is for the creation of an EU HPD association, or at least some kind of secretariat. So what have you in mind? Is that one for you, Olympia, or perhaps for you, Olympia? Is this the idea? A formal association, or a secretariat, or what?
Yes, I could let Julien, who works with us, to highlight how this association, let's call it association, will work. And I will definitely support from the Eurima side. Indeed,
that's exactly the bit where we stepped in as Ruud Pedersen to help on this exciting project. So to answer your question simply, Chris, indeed, it's going to be an association in the EU. And here we have really what is a broad sketch of how governance will look like, and maybe for those who are wondering what the relationship will be with our US partner HPDC. You can see here symbolized on this graph that basically the two entities, of course, are distinct. They have an agreement, they're gonna have an agreement between them at board level, and each of them have their own committees. So, you know, HPDC, we've simplified here as many different subcommittees, but on top of those has a technical committee, which is of course in charge of developing the US version of the standard, and that is used by all these member companies that they have. And very simply here, the EU HPD Association in Europe would have a similar such committee. And you can see here from these slightly blurred lines that there, of course, there would be a degree of cooperation between the two, because as we discussed, the methodologies and the frameworks are very much going to be in symbiosis, but when it comes to the contents, there will be notable differences in the sense that we are EU regulation ready, and we have different regulatory requirements here in Europe. And this is for the same reason that you can see from this chart, that we would have also different subgroups attached to our EU association that would be in charge of aligning with the EU rules on the technical level and make sure that this is really an EU stewardship project, but also to be in constant dialogue with the EU institutions and their own needs on that front. So, you know, everything that Olympia mentioned to you at the beginning of this presentation, the idea is that we are here to be very much in step with what's going to come under the construction product regulation, but also the idea of material passport. You've seen it in the Circular Economy Action Plan, and as well in the two initiatives published today, actually, the Sustainable Strategy and the Renovation Wave to an extent. So this is how it's going to look like, and this is what it's going to do.
Okay, thank you. But there's practical questions here, Julian. I mean, if I was a representing a middle-sized construction products company, I would want some answers to questions like, well, who's going to actually run this thing, and who's going to have the votes? I mean, how is going to are the big companies going to dominate, or will I actually have a say in a genuine say in deciding the framework? I mean, I take it there's no answers to these questions yet.
These are very good questions, Chris, and they are very legitimate to ask. Indeed, you've started to give some element of answers there, and you know, we want to walk before we run, and for the moment, of course, we are still very much at the planning phase, even though we are quite advanced in the work that we've done, in sense that when it comes to the administrative requirements in Belgium, where this association would be legally set up, we know what we have to do. We're in touch with the authorities and such like. But when it comes to the internal governance, actually, the companies that you have heard about today who are part of this task force and together with Eurima, we're still very much in discussion into how they're going to be balanced representation in terms of the voice of the members and so on. So this is why it's very timely for the audience of this webinar today that some of you may want to also have a voice, have a hand in the shaping of the functioning of the association this time forward. And this is absolutely, this is something that we welcome, those who want to also give their ideas. And some of you will maybe just be interested to be rather more on the user and membership side and just be interested in using the HPDs once they exist or once they're developed. And that's okay as well. So for the moment, we still have a lot of things that are open. And we are welcoming basically inputs in whatever shape they can take based on your level of interest and ambition.
But there's an actual organization here, I mean, whatever we want to call it, association or framework or whatever. But there's actually on this slide here before us, I mean, there's an actual structure here, and you'll be asking construction product manufacturers to say, we will join this and help shape the rules and help shape it. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen for a month or something. It's going to be a permanent organization reviewing products and setting new standards and revising in line with
exactly
changes in European legislation and all that.
Yes, Chris, that's absolutely right. The task ahead of us is really big, and the work is only starting. And this is also why this opportunity today is a very good occasion to take stock of the interest and the expertise that can be brought to the association this time forward. Some of you who are listening to us, you may have already ideas on how to help with the technical setting up of the standard itself and would really want to be involved in that, or know a colleague who would be. And then some others, you may be more interested in being represented at EU level and be part of these discussions that we are going to have with the institutions. So really, as much as a presentation of work to date, this occasion that we are having today is also a call for expertise, a call for experts who want to join us in the next steps.
Okay, I hope those watching have heard that call. But I was really struck by that last slide, the one about international governance. I mean, the sheer number of companies, of businesses in America that have joined their equivalent organization was impressive. You know, I mean, frankly, I would have expected the Americans not to have participated in that sense. Maybe I have European prejudices here, but it just shows you, you know, don't think. If we're not inventing a wheel here, we're simply copying an example of really good practice, which in this case happens to be in America, then don't get left behind, because, you know, if others move forward, then, you know, there's a real risk that you'll be left out in the cold when it comes to shaping the way this organization takes shape. But there's a question here, if you like, which challenges what I've just said from Tom Woolley. And he says, are companies like Saint-Gobain, Knauf and Eurima planning to stop production of their many hazardous products? Are they planning to develop new and healthier products? Now, I see that as a question with two edges. One is the specific about, are you going for substitution? Are you trying to, you know, follow the best reach practice and perhaps the best practices of the new European chemical sustainability strategy and developing safer alternatives to existing products? But it's also a sideswipe, is it not, at Eurima and Saint-Gobain and Knauf? I mean, question is, why I don't see it. I don't see why you three companies have taken this initiative effectively on behalf of the industry as a whole. I mean, it's very good of you. Is it simply because you are generally seeing the writing on the wall and that the European regulations will come forward and you might as well be in the driving seat to try and ensure that the construction industry benefits rather than is hurt by such regulations? Or, you know, is there some narrow commercial interest which isn't very obvious to most of us that you will gain from taking this lead? Olympia, go on. I'll throw that one at you. Is Eurima out to control the construction products industry by taking this initiative?
No, we are not here to rule anybody, I would say. We are here to just raise the concern, and I'm sure that many of the attendees that are in the similar position as I am, representing certain manufacturers, share these concerns that we raised in our slides. In fact, what we are trying to do is to create a collaboration. We know that we share concerns, we share challenges, and with this initiative, we want to move a step further and provide, as I said in my previous comment, with solutions. And that's why we are urging to spread the word for this initiative and be involved now. Regarding the specific question that you posed, maybe Charlotte and Bruno are more capable to answer, but from my side, what I want to raise is this collaboration for everybody in the construction industry.
Yeah, if I may add before going to the next slide, I think Bruno and I, we are in charge of product stewardship in our company. So it means that we are here to improve the sustainability performance of our product. So it's our duty to move in that direction. But also, as we have said, there is also a burden for manufacturers because we receive requests every day to deliver this information. So we have to deal with that. And last but not least, I think this is the most important thing. The customer, the market is expecting for that. So as a company, we have also economical interest to deliver tomorrow the products that the customers are willing to buy. So this is really just the way we are working day by day.
I think if I respond to Tom Woolley's question also, he suggests asking whether you're looking to substitute existing products, allegedly hazardous products, for healthy alternatives. I mean, surely the first step in this is to do what you have been advocating throughout this webinar,
Exactly.
which is openness and transparency, so far as content. I mean, that's the beginning of the process in identifying problematic products, and developing alternatives. Is it not? Is that fair?
Yes, really.
Charlotte? Yeah.
Yes, really. As I said, when you provide transparency, a manufacturer doesn't want to show to everybody that he has hazardous substances. So the idea when you deliver transparency is to improve your product, to show that you are not hazardous. So for sure, the first step is to promote transparency. And as I said at the beginning, this transparency is an important step to move toward the phasing out of hazardous substances in the built environment.
Thank you.
And if I may here, Chris, I quickly remove my hat of consultant and put back my hat of former ECHA and former Commission. All this idea of material content and substances in article, it's also something that the agency ECHA in Helsinki is very much active on. And before they think of restricting and removing some substances from products, they have to know where they are. And this work of inventory, they cannot do it by themselves. So some of the attendees may be following closely the developments around the SCIP database, which here concern the substances of very high concern. And for me, it's when I see solutions like Euhpd, these are obvious solutions where ECHA is short-handed in doing this kind of initiatives. So when the industry comes forward with solutions that already have done part of the work, it also saves them time. So there's a very obvious administrative, let's say, efficiency aspect to this. And from the side of the policymaker, it's certainly a plus as well.
Okay, thank you, Julian. And I think I'm going to ask you to respond to the next question too, which is one far too technical for me, which is from Henning Bloch. I apologize for the pronunciation. How do you envisage the EU HPD responding or corresponding? How do you see it corresponding to ECHA's SCIP database? So put your former ECHA hat on, Julian.
Yeah, I think I partially answered to that because to me it's something that can certainly be brought as an answer because and here I think Charlotte and Bruno can actually correct what I say, that actually our scope here would be broader than the SCIP, which is just concerned on the substances of very high concern. So to me, this is definitely something that can be also, that can create synergies in the obligations regarding SCIP. But before I put my foot in my mouth and overstep myself, I think it's good if Bruno or Charlotte can confirm that I'm right.
Do you want to have a go, Bruno, and then Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming back to what I said during the presentation, is like, the philosophy of the EU HPD is not far away of what is already existing in the US. I mean, you have the results of the new HPD assessment, and these results can talk to several different platforms, can be plugged into different platforms. So we talked about LEED. I mentioned specifically LEED, which is more healthy building requirement, if I may say that. But if we have the philosophy that this results of a new HPD could talk to several platforms, we could also think about that the EU HPD could be fit for purpose to connect with the requirements of the SCIP database. That could definitely be, I guess, in the scope of and the philosophy of this initiative.
Charlotte, final word or not, or maybe it's been covered.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Bruno, for this answer.
Okay, so perhaps one last question here from Hans-Jörg Kirsten. Do you plan to monitor the country origin of chemicals, such as critical minerals, countries with low countries with low environmental standards or labour standards? I mean, this is a question It's a question which affects everyone who tries to touch upon sustainability. And look at the problems that the battery industry has. On the one hand, this is we want electrification of cars, but on the other hand, look at some of the countries which are providing the materials which are essential to this. Maybe this is work in progress, but please, would anyone like to have a go at answering this?
No, today these important questions are not included in the scope of what we want to achieve at first stage. And as it was said, we want to walk before running. So first of all, we deliver the framework. We try to deliver the framework for content declaration and hazard identification, on all these other aspects linked to criticity or linked to social aspects are not included in this first goal.
Yeah, what's that expression? Sometimes the perfect is the enemy of the good. Let's make progress, and let's then, having made some progress, then try and make some more, but one step at a time. Right, Julian, let's have a look at the next slide. So, budgetary considerations.
Yes.
I suppose the question for you is, we're talking about setting up some sort of secretariat, a permanent organization here. So what are you going to be asking of participating companies?
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think this is probably a question that's already in the minds of some of our participants, and this is absolutely fair. Money is still what drives a lot of the of initiatives in Brussels and elsewhere. So, like we said in the last slide, indeed, there's a lot of work that's going to be in front of the association when it starts its operations, when it comes to the technical side, but also the outreach activities with the EU. And of course, as it's an association, you're probably aware that by law, at least, it needs to have a secretariat. So it doesn't mean that these people have to be full-time, but you need to factor that in the budget. So there's also a small, let's say, but not non-consequent participatory fee to the HPDC scheme that, of course, is being negotiated also in the sense that we are going to be a partner organization. So this is something that is still being discussed. So the purpose of this slide is really to just drive home the point that, yes, indeed, there's going to be budgetary consideration, money consideration. And so what is going to be the source of income, you might ask? So quite simply, membership fees are going to be a big source because those companies who are interested in using and developing their own health products declaration will do so as members. That's right. But seeing the level of ambition that we have, and actually the machinery, let's say, that has to be put in place in the first year, the discussions that we've had between Knauf, Saint-Gobain, and Eurima at this first stage was that very almost 100% sure it's going to need to be a bit of a startup fund for the to invest in this burgeoning, soon to be born association. So here, I think everyone can guess where this is going. Not everyone, of course, has to become an investor in this, but we do appreciate those who come forward who would be interested in that. Some of you will think this is something I want to invest in for the future, and this is going to bring additional benefits for me, for my company, not only now, but also in the long run. And some of you may think, well, I just wait that I become a member and I can use this, and that's fine. Really, the bottom line of all this is the more we are when we start, the lower are the costs. So strength is in numbers. Some of you may be used to working in consortia and such like, so you know a bit the principle there. So I just wanted to make this clear because this is going to be for those who are interested in joining us in this journey. It's going to be part of the discussions that that some of us are going to have with you one-on-one.
Okay, thank you. I'm surprised you didn't touch upon the point that was made early on about the Commission's announcement about the renovation wave today, and what is it, a proposed doubling of insulation schemes and the like between now and 2035. I think some of us looking for the zero carbon 2050 target would say that's not enough, and no doubt members of the European Parliament will be pressing for more ambitious targets to be set, and therefore there is great opportunities for the construction industry, and this will be a small price to pay, whatever level it may be set at. But tell me, moving on from the presentation you've just given us, Julian, what are the benefits? I mean, are there commercial benefits for a company that takes part in this, besides having the opportunity to shape rules
yes,
which end up affecting it?
Absolutely, Chris, and I think you started to almost take the words out of my mouth here, and I'm glad you did. It's true that as was presented by Olympia at the beginning of this webinar, we're really at a crucial juncture where the construction sector is really going to be faced with this enormous challenge of let's now renovate, and when you renovate, you create waste, and when you create waste, it's one of the biggest sources that can be easily reused in the circular economy. So the construction products produce a lot of that. So Euhpd is actually going to help you be a player in this construction, in this circular construction sector that is burgeoning now and that the EU is calling of its wishes. So what are going to be the benefits in practice? So of course, the first quadrant here, the first column, is you're going to be part of our ecosystem, the Euhpd ecosystem, which means, like I said earlier, as a member, you get to make your HPDs, to use them, to use the tools that are the IT tools that are used to make declarations, and making use of the logo also. Like I said also earlier, some of you will be interested also in the governance of this association and will have a hand in shaping where it's going, the direction of travel this time forward. So that's also a big advantage. And indeed, at this time where really so much is at stake, this is a really good jumping platform to outreach to EU policymakers and not only work on the HPDs themselves, but also probably have an opportunity to voice some of your points and your issues to policymakers through the Euhpd association. So, you know, and we always say, like, when we have platforms of information to share with peers, this always has a lot of added value, knock-on effects that are very good. So it's good to have those forums created rather than having to create it under the pressure of ECHA and having to scramble. So I think it's very timely to do that now. So going very quickly on operations and reputation, I think this was outlined very well by Bruno and Charlotte. You know, better practice and more safety. Of course, the more you know about your products and what is in them, I think I don't have to teach anyone about this. It's clear that when a voluntary agreement is in place and gives you the tools to have traceability, that also creates efficiencies in the HSE work and the stewardship within the industry. Reputationally, really, we want to create a gold standard here, and I think this is going to be noticed. We can see already from the interest that we have from people who wanted to participate today, there is a need, the need exists, and Euhpd is going to answer it because we are now the first movers. And so I think by tagging early on to this project, clearly companies that are members and that are going to be also part of helping shape this association will receive very clear reputational benefits. And yes, I think that's pretty much the point I wanted to drive home. We're enthusiastic.
You're doing a selling job here, but you shouldn't have to do a selling job, because as I've made the point, I'm sort of trying to be an impartial chair here, but I can see this as I can see that if enough companies get together to give this a head of steam, and this goes forward, and as you say, establishes a gold standard, then who doesn't want to be there? I mean, who wants to be left behind? If you want your company to be left behind, then don't get involved. I mean, that's the way. But don't blame us for not telling you, because we are telling you. There's a question here from Elise Vitali, and if I'm right, I think what she's saying is, do the panelists envisage a role for observers, in particular environmental NGOs, having a role within probably a cheaper role, not having to pay the full membership, I suspect, but having a role in the work of this EU HPD? Who would like to have a go at that?
I'm happy to say already it's a resounding yes. So we kept the governance slide nice and simple.
Right, okay, discuss it. Yeah, okay. I mean, just again, from the point of view of a parliamentarian, I can say that if you want trust, then having some NGOs involved who can speak impartially and of course, so long as they're endorsing the outcomes, then that reinforces the strength of the organization. On the other hand, of course, many NGOs don't like to be too involved working with companies, because it restricts their ability to criticize them if they've been involved in fashioning the outcome. Olympia, I think you want to say something.
Yes, if I may add to already very well addressed answer by Julien, I think it's essential for NGOs to be involved in this process. And indeed, the governance would allow them to be involved and help shaping also these initiatives better. So yes, I think it's essential. And
right.
Yes, they will be involved.
Well, I suppose that means they'll be invited to be involved, because it'll be up to them to decide for themselves whether they wish to participate. Okay, thank you. Right, we have time for a couple more questions before we finish. Hans-Jörg Kirsten again. Now, who's using again acronyms which I don't understand. Maybe you do. So I shall pronounce them wrong. Does it make sense to include upload functions from IUCLID already in place for poison center notification, registration, biocides, etc., etc.?
Yes, I think a very technical question already to start with. So I wouldn't have I wouldn't answer that myself straight away, unless Bruno, you already want to me it makes sense to have the Euclid function, but this is something we plan to do.
Yeah, that's a very good comment, to be honest, a very good reflection, a very interesting and challenging one as well. To be honest, we haven't thought about this for the time being. As we said, we are really at the early stage of the initiative, and we want to build correctly the two first bricks, with the ambition that these two first bricks, will talk to the appropriate platform, being REACH, being any other that would make sense for the initiative. So I don't have the answer. I don't think that we have the answer today. But it's not a no, it's not a yes, it's just very challenging, very good reflection. And we do hope that if we are joined by more people throughout this initiative, this type of debate, we could have them. But for the time being, I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. It's a very, very interesting question, very challenging one. And I thank really the participants who have dropped this on the table. But I would say that at first sight it would make sense, definitely. Now, when, how, and under which feature, that's another debate. Maybe a little bit too early to discuss about this, but very good question indeed.
Thank you. And I think the way you answer that just demonstrates the nature of what's happening here. I mean, this is a very open, transparent way of trying to get an association or an organization of some kind established. And no one's making any secret that the answers aren't resolved yet, and there's a number of issues where people will no doubt have different points of view. The essential element is that we need people to get around the table and start thrashing out these issues and find the common ground. Look, we're moving towards an end here. So let me just say to those watching, if you've got a final question, then submit it now. But let me just ask Olympia. The question is, what comes next? So maybe another slide for you, Julian, because my understanding is that everyone who registered for this discussion, for this webinar, will now be sent a survey form to help us shape the next stage of the process. And I think, Olympia, they're also going to get a telephone call, probably from you, to so they simply don't ignore the piece of paper that comes through their letterbox or their email. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, if I could say from the Eurima side, and Julien could further highlight the whole process that will be followed, is in support of what Julien will explain on the survey. For the ones that are interested in joining, in supporting this initiative, I think we thought that it would be better to have an individual outreach, to have a more one-to-one discussion and understand the different point of views. This is important. But maybe I could let Julien explain what will be the survey about, and the phone calls would follow from the survey.
Sure, thanks, Olympia. I mean, we've heard already a lot of really interesting contributions today and challenging questions. And that's really, I have to say, I have to thank you for your questions, because this is really also taking us into the heart of what we're trying to do here with the association. So clearly the survey will help you to build a little bit on that and see where your priorities are. But there's also free text boxes where you can tell us a bit more what you think Euhpd can do further on top of what we've outlined here. So it's really to show you again how we are open to contribution and to your expertise. And indeed, it's also for us quite simply a way to register your interest and to know if you're happy to be contacted. And then the next phase, indeed, like Olympia was saying, would be to talk to you individually and see really to what level of ambition and to level of interest you want to go further in this journey with us. Really, the tailored experience is really the let's say the bottom line here. It's really the name of the game. And so based on a probably larger group than we have now to cheer for this project along, I would say the winter months, our idea is to then move on to have a second webinar to really announce the official launch of the association and to make it coincide with its the start of its legal personality in Belgium, to make it official and recognized. But of course, it's not just about the legal bit. It's also about telling the world that we are now existing and we're going to start our work. So at the same occasion of this second webinar would be also a press release, and that would take a bit of a form of a pledge from those who are starting the journey with us. And we are hoping to generate, of course, interest and hopefully even support from EU institutions at this crucial stage. That would be really for us a very important prerequisite. And the idea really is that we can start all the fun and nice technical work, which I'm sure you're all very eager to start actually in the beginning of next year, and really start the meat of the project.
Okay. Any last words from our panelists, our participants? No, all happy, right? Well, I'm just going to say then that we have come to the end of our time. So I want to say thank you to Olympia Dolla of Eurima, Charlotte Petiot of Saint-Gobain, and Bruno Bleeky of Knauf Insulation. Oh, and of course, Julian de Cruz from Ruud Pedersen Public Affairs, who's been technically moderating and and contributing as well. And of course, our three representatives of manufacturing companies have taken the lead in all of this. You've done all the work. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your enthusiasm, because it seems to me, just as someone who's coming to this from an outside perspective, that you're trying to do something which is likely to benefit the construction industry as a whole. So good luck to you. Good luck with the next stage of the project, this project, which is all about securing a voluntary agreement to establish a new open standard for the construction product industry. Lots of luck. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone. This brings this webinar to an end.
Thank you.
Thank you.